Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. All right, go ahead.
Okay, call the meeting to order. You can join me in the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Welcome everybody to a strategic planning meeting. We're going to start off with Holly.
What time did you? About 2:00. But I can screen share. You're in the. All right, gotcha. You're already on there.
Yeah, and just for everyone's information, as we're getting started tonight, kind of the order. We're going to have Holly from Crossroads, who's been working on a strategic plan for the township, give us an update on that strategic plan and the processes that have been engaged within the township and kind of where we're headed over the summer months. And then Dana McDaniel from Delaware County is going to present an aspect of that strategic plan that's focused on economic development. And Delaware County and his office is leading that charge to develop that plan along with Montrose, and he'll give an update on that plan. And then finally, Pete Griggs is here. He is our attorney at large that represents us in various settings. He was in a discussion that we had with Columbus and Delaware County and can provide his professional perspective on that conversation and the relationship that we're attempting to develop there with a very important strategic partner. And then we'll talk about a couple other things as well. But that's gives you time to get your PowerPoint up and let you know where we're headed. Okay.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. So as you mentioned, I am here tonight to give an update of where we are on the strategic plan process. And so with that, just to kind of give everyone some background, I think probably as if you have been following this, you probably understand why we are going through the strategic plan process. But just to reiterate that we have we're looking at the township in a proactive way through the strategic planning process. And as we go through some of this history, when I go through the slides, you'll see that we've been working in a reactive position up to this point. And so the purpose of this plan is to look in more of a futuristic timeframe and what do we want it Harlem Township to look like 25 years from now, et cetera. So speaking of past activities, I think it's important to highlight where we have been, because I think that kind of sets the stage for where we want to go. And so if everyone recalls, Harlem Township prepared a comprehensive plan in conjunction with the Delaware County Regional Planning Commission, and that plan was adopted in November of 2021. That plan really focused on 5-acre lots, 2-acre lots, and really just preserving what is what is out there back in 2021. In January of 2022, Intel was announced. There were also other development pressures that were really boiling up on the southern border. You have, Facebook and Amazon and all the different large entities that are building to the south of your border and really starting to put pressure on this area. It was also announced that, Delaware County and the city of Columbus, who had an agreement for sewers to be brought up to the Harlem Township border at the southwest corner of the township. That's been on the books. That agreement had been on the books since the 90s, but it was announced, in that 2022 era that they were going to move forward with that trunk line being constructed to that border. So it was really at that point in time that the township reached out with a request for proposals to figure out how they could look at their comprehensive plan that had just been adopted to adjust it to address those specific changes that had crept up on them in those few months. We responded to that request for proposals. We were selected in spring of 2022 to complete that plan. And we called it the Harlem Township Quick Strategy Guide. And I should say I'm with Crossroads Community Planning. I think most of you know me, but just in case you don't. And we completed that quick strategy guide in March 2023. We quickly started to implement some of the recommendations out of that plan and doing zoning overlay districts over the next couple of years that results in an overlay map that looks something like this that really focuses on the borders of the township to help strategically provide competitive zoning to the adjacent areas so that when potential neighbors might look at that or when developers might look at potential neighbors and what those zoning districts might be in neighboring communities, really setting the stage and creating comparable zoning within the township to help the township retain its borders and not be subject to potential annexation in the future. It was with that we kind of took a pause. We had some things that, needed to clear the air within Harlem Township, and the township reorganized itself, and we have the current board of trustees that are in place here today. And it was really their initiative to take a look at what could we do to be more proactive now that we kind of have this stage set to protect our borders. So we started this process for a strategic plan in January of this year. And the trustee again engaged Crossroads to help with that process. And you'll see that we have some additional partners as I walk through this. But really helping to identify the strategic priorities for the trustees, doing that in a transparent manner to identify them. And then once the strategic priorities are adopted through this process, it will help align all of the decision-making process for this board and future boards into the future years, so that when decisions are made, you'll look at it and say, is it in line with those priorities? And then those decisions should be made accordingly. So we wanted to reach out and make sure that we were doing this again in a transparent way. So we have done a number of community-wide meetings, February through May, and you'll see on the screen what different activities we talked about at each of those meetings. We've also been working with a steering committee that was, by the way, identified through a blind process to help make sure that we had an adequate representation of the township and the different sectors within the township. And that steering committee is really put in place to be a check to our work, so that when we go to these community meetings and we're hearing this community feedback, then we're bringing it to the steering committee and saying, this is what we heard. Did you hear that? So it's kind of a check and balance to that. In addition to that, the steering committee is also trying to help exponentially get the word out about the different planning processes and what the trustees are doing through this strategic plan process. So they've conducted what we called soup sessions. If you've ever heard of a meeting in a box, it's the same concept. It is basically where we provided all the tools to conduct the meeting. We provided little recipe cards, like in a soup jar, and gave them the directions on how to run a meeting. And then they went out and held these meetings with their neighbors. And the intent behind that too is not only to get additional feedback, but also because it's neighbor to neighbor, that they're a little more able to open up and talk, and residents are willing to talk to their neighbors more. So we were able to really gain some additional insight through that. And then the trustees have also set up these special meetings so that we can have additional feedback and conversation at a trustee level to make sure that everything that we are hearing is being funneled to them. And then the priorities can be tweaked here and there based upon that feedback. So with that, I'm going to go over what has kind of risen to the top as the strategic priorities as we've gone through this process. So you'll see these 5 different priorities that are on the board. They're not exactly what we came up with as draft priorities when we came out of that first meeting, but we took them through that series of steps that I just talked about to get to the trustees at the April 30th meeting, who the trustees then refined to get to these 5 priorities in these particular order. From there, we broke them down into what does this mean and kind of gave some example action steps for each of those. That's what we took back to the community at the May 10th meeting and got feedback from them, and also to the steering committee at their May 15th meeting. And so I'm going to report out on that tonight. So what do each of these mean? What feedback have we heard, and kind of what the next steps are after that? So the first one is country, suburban lifestyle and autonomy. One of the things at the April 30th meeting that I really heard from the trustees was the feedback that we've heard has been a lot of maintain the rural area, maintain the agriculture. And while that aesthetic or that feel might be what you experience when you drive through the township, the reality is that the trustees are saying there's three large farmers in the area. We're really not an agricultural community. It's not an agricultural economic base that we have here at the township. It's more of those larger lots. It's more of that rural aesthetic. So switching the mindset from rural to more suburban, but knowing that suburban doesn't really fit the character either. The trustees came up with country suburban lifestyle. And then also along with that, making sure that the autonomy of the township is protected and that the township form of government continues into the future. Some of the example action steps that you see up there were discussed at both the community meeting and the steering committee. The feedback that we got was, I'm going to start with the steering committee because I think it's important for the trustees to hear this. The steering committee was a little concerned with the term country suburban. We shared with them the exurban definition. They, at first, just hearing that term, didn't like that. But when we explained the definition of it, they said, that's exactly what we are. So they like the exurban. They're afraid that residents won't know what it is, just like they didn't. So they're a little concerned to use it, but they like the term and they like the word homestead. So somehow maybe fitting those terms in together. So we can tweak that and work with that. I wanted to give you that feedback. At the community meeting, we heard that high density apartments and complexes need to be addressed. There's concerns over that. Again, that goes back to education and understanding where those sewers are coming and why we have made those higher density zoning districts in those areas. We also heard the word homestead at the community meetings as well. We also heard the term hobby farms, making sure that we integrate those into what we are doing as we move forward with these overlay zoning districts.
Can I just interrupt
Yeah.
for a second? What is a homestead?
I would describe it as a home on a large lot. And I think that's where we have to get that mindset of, can we have some estate residential that might feel like a homestead, but
Okay.
might be clustered in a different way. So I think it's using those words, but tweaking it to address kind of the direction the township's going.
Okay.
I think my concern with that is that homestead is often used for tax exemptions in the state of Ohio.
Okay.
A public definition here, a home and adjoining land accompanied by a farm. The an ancestral home. Tracts of land acquired by US public lands by filing a record and living on and cultivating.
Yeah. So I think again, that large home on a large lot for farming, I agree with you. I understand that tax term, so we need to figure that out.
Mike Pierce would say he lives on a homestead, right, Mike? Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But John Trainer. Yes, John Trainer does not live on a homestead,
Yeah.
even though I have a home on 3 acres. It's not.
I have to ask them.
Homestead actually kind of has a meaning. It's kind of where people grow things and have animals and things like that. And I think the hobby farm and homestead are probably something that are expressive.
And from a librarian's perspective, we have a lot of people looking for books on homesteading. And that really is what they want to do on their 3 acres or 5 acres or even 1 acre.
It's about
It-
self-sufficiency.
Yes,
It's not
exactly.
to sell to the community, it's for their own.
It's a lifestyle. Yeah. It's a lifestyle. So the function of homes, of that word has changed over time. And today it means a certain way of life that can be sustained on a relatively small number of acres. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
That is helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm in a neighborhood and I'm homesteading because I have a large garden and animals,
Yes,
but I'm in the middle of the city,
yes.
so. Doesn't really mean farm.
Just to add to further research of it, Holly, homestead is defined in the ORC, section 323, 151. So we might just want to add that to the conversation. And did you get any sort of indication from the steering committee, like when the mention of hobby farm? I get the sense that the main concern as we talk about a lot of this stuff is that people aren't going to be able to raise chickens and such on their property anymore, right? Is it basically that the spirit of why we're concerned about these types of things?
Yeah, I think it's making sure that she can have her garden, have her chickens, have her, yes.
Right.
And not coming in with a form of government that doesn't allow.
For sure.
So I think that pretty much covers what we've heard on that particular topic, and I think doing some additional research on that homestead, I think is warranted. I like what we've heard here tonight. Going hand in glove with the country suburban, is the intentional growth and development. Making sure that we are, you as a township are focusing on where that development should happen and in a strategic manner and not reacting, but proactively looking at it that ahead of time due to partnerships with internal and external entities and what those pressures are. So some of the action steps that you see up there were discussed. Some of the feedback that we received at the community meeting was similar comments to the original for the first priority. Making sure that when considering overlays and other changes that we are strategically communicating, and this is kind of getting into the communications priority, but strategically communicating with those who are affected by that particular district or whatever we're working on. The feedback we got was that people feel a lot of information coming to them, which is a good thing. It means that we're, that transparency is there, but making sure that we're honing in and educating folks specific to what they might be interested in. That we also got feedback that in order to intentionally grow, we need to know what the landowners' intents are. So somehow being able to survey the landowners to understand what their future plans are. Having a better understanding of stormwater impacts and looking at that at a regional level. And then the steering committee added keeping roads in mind, making sure that we're looking at that. They also dittoed the survey of landowners and wanted to see if there's a way to do that anonymously. And then they also, under this section, suggested more farm succession planning. Again, maybe that goes back to what those landowners are, intent is, and is there any way to work with them on that? Any questions on intentional growth? Okay. So then the next one is maintaining healthy relationships. This is both internal and external. And when we say external, we're including the surrounding municipalities, surrounding townships, and the county. Making sure that not only are you communicating within your township and with your residents, but also working with those outside entities so that you understand what their intents are and help build trust with your relationships with each of them and being able to create a plan forward that understands each of the intents of all those different entities. So you'll see some example strategies or action steps up on the board there. And feedback that we got at the community-wide level is that we need a solid strategic partner. I think the person that mentioned that indicated that maybe we're looking at multiple partners, and there was a sense of wanting one strong strategic partner. There were concerns over limited opportunities for the township to incorporate as a village due to the laws requiring neighboring municipalities to sign off within a 3-mile range. So there was talk about how do we incorporate as a township, how do we incorporate into a village, and how that area is shrinking as neighboring communities annex. And then also wanting to discuss how home rule works and understand that better. So, any questions on that one? Okay. And then community identity and pride. This is something that can be carried forward from past activities, making sure that there's an identity, really focusing on the core center of the township, the village center, and how do we create a place that is says, hey, we are in Harlem Township, and a place that people want to come, a place that is, you know, a place where local entrepreneurs can be successful. So not only from creating a town village center, but then also having a branding system so that when you're at each end of the township, when you come in, you know you're in the township based on the colors, based upon the signage, etc. Feedback that we got from the community is having some kind of branding that incorporates that rural agricultural theme, and also how to incorporate agritourism into that, such as wineries and things like that. The thing that the steering committee really focused on under this particular priority was the branding. And they really wanted us to emphasize the importance of that and actually make that a short-term recommendation versus a longer-term thing. They thought that was kind of a low-hanging fruit that we could, township could move forward on easily. Any questions? Okay. And then last but not least is safety and well-being. This is really not only looking at our fire, but also looking at how do we provide police safety and our administrative programs. How do we ensure that they are fully staffed, properly trained, have the equipment they need? And then understanding, how that forecasted population, how we need to grow those staffs in relationship to the population growth. So you'll see some example action steps there. Some of the feedback that we received at the community meeting was how do we pay for more services? So we talked a lot about all the different economic development tools that can be utilized to help offset some of those costs. There was also discussion about adjusting this to reflect not only staff, but also buildings, office space, maintenance, cemeteries, etc. So making sure that there's a plan for all of that as we grow. And then from the steering committee, they wanted a better understanding of what those salary levels are for the different positions that may need to be added as the township grows. Particularly a township administrator. And that is one thing we will update for you because we had that in the quick strategy guide, but updating that with more current salaries and understanding of what neighboring communities are doing in terms of township administrators. So we are in the process of finalizing the feedback on here, getting additional recommendations built into this. So what our next steps are is I have given the steering committee homework. And between now and their next meeting, which is the middle of June, we have asked each steering committee member to visit at least one community. And we gave them a list of different communities that they could choose from to learn about what is their architectural style, what is their planning and zoning that got them to where they are today, what kind of hiccups did they feel when they were going through that development process? What are lessons learned? What are some positive things that came out of their process when they developed? So we have folks going to New Albany. We have folks going to Bridge Park. I believe Clay, Indiana. We have some folks going there. Clay, Indiana is one that is very similar, I think, to the concept of what we're seeing or hearing for this township. So I'm excited that someone is going there. There's also a place called Aberlin in near Lebanon, Ohio. So we have a group going there, and that one is exciting because it kind of makes me feel about the homestead and the definition that we just heard here, self-sufficiency. There's actually some farming involved in that one that just helps sustain the residents within that community. So I'd love to hear more about the ups and downs of how they got through that one. And then we also have some more suburban style developments that our folks are going to in Grove City. The Pinnacle, but then the other one, I'm trying to think of the other name, the racetrack. I can't think of the name of it right now. So what's that? Beulah Park, yeah, Beulah Park. So we have a couple people going there. Then we had one steering committee member that suggested that she go to a place that she felt was not successful in what they did, and just to hear what their story is and how they got to where they are. So she's going to visit that location and report back on that one as well. So once we get the feedback from the field trips, we're going to start putting a draft plan together. And while we're doing that, the county, Dana McDaniel, who's going to be talking here in a moment, along with the Montrose Group, is going to be starting the economic development component of the plan. And so we'll be helping Dana with that as far as feeding information to him while we're also drafting the strategic plan. We've identified the chapters that you have listed up on your screen here. And we'll have the draft plan, except for the economic development stuff, ready to go at the end of June, early July. And then as soon as Dana's group finishes up that, we will plug that in and adjust anything that we need to as far as recommendations. Last but not least, township trustees have hired NKSK to help with a peer review, just having an outside perspective look at the draft plan and see if it reflects the right process and the right feedback, or hearing the feedback, or making sure it reflects the feedback that's listed and heard throughout this process. So again, lots of checks and balances to this to help with that transparency and to help to make sure everything is moving in the right direction. And then we plan for this to be adopted sometime August, September-ish. So that is where we are.
Any questions on Holly's presentation? Yes. State your name, please.
Being seriously considered, and is it even really a reality that can be made to happen?
So I can
Go.
All right.
Yeah.
Incorporation is not a consideration for this board. Incorporation requires 800 people per square mile within 3 square miles. So that's
2 square miles.
2 square miles,
Sorry.
2 square miles with 800 people that are three linear miles from other municipalities. The only place that meets that requirement in Harlem Township is currently northeast of Center Village, where there are cornfields. So there will not be 1,600 people living in those cornfields for a long time. And so it will be a future board of trustees, probably more than a decade from now, that have to wrestle with whether or not this township should be incorporated. Although home rule is an option that we are seriously taking a look at and that we'll probably talk about later in this meeting. That's correct.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Dana?
Please.
These copies or may not be able to go around. If you could share them, it'd be great. My name is Dana McDaniel. I'm with the Office of Economic Development for Delaware County on an interim basis for a while, and assisting them in sort of the reshaping of their office and trying to implement the county strategic economic development plan. If you haven't seen that, you might want to go out to the economic development website for the county and look up their strategic plan and get familiar with it. The idea is not to impose that strategic plan on Harlan Township. That is an overarching strategy. So what is an economic development strategy? Fundamentally, it's simply what do you do to retain, expand businesses that you have? What do you do to attract businesses? How do you align workforce? How do you align infrastructure? And focus on attraction for economic development that will, help your community to thrive. So that's an overarching definition. What I've handed out to you is just a memo to the board about our methodology. It doesn't have anything to do with outcomes yet because we don't know what those are until we do a little bit more exploration. But I want to thank the trustees for the opportunity to assist. Appreciate the invite on behalf of the commissioners and our office, and look forward to working with the community and working with Holly and her team. Fundamentally, what this is saying is our methodology is really to come in, as Holly's explained, to come in kind of along behind all the great work that they've been doing and to garner the input that they've gained. We're not going to reinvent that wheel. There's no need to do that. However, you'll see in there that we do offer to do a series of interviews per the township trustees guidance. We also conduct and or participate in more focus groups as they evolve, just to see what else we can garner. And then once we do that, obtain that input, we'll assess that. The key here, as Holly really pointed out, in our economic development will really weave in and out of all of these strategies that they have. And
Sorry.
that
Can you
Sure.
turn to the
Oh, I'm so
people
sorry.
online? No, you're
Yeah,
fine.
sorry
People
about that.
online just can't hear you.
Sure. And there are pieces and parts you probably picked up on in those strategies that actually, connect with economic development one way or the other. So, what we will do is take a look at all of those as well, try to weave ourselves into that. Key to a comprehensive planning process is what are your land uses that you're looking at? And then how do those land uses lend themselves to economic development where the community wants those land uses to serve that function? So that's where Montrose Group that was mentioned will come in. We have them on retainer. They help us with economic development planning at the county. And we will ask them to use some of their modeling that they have to help talk about and generate some modeling on what outcomes might be expected from those types of land uses. To the extent that you want, mixed use development, retail, office, industrial type uses, depending on what they are, and I don't know what those are yet, within the township. So then based on that, we'll also look at regional economic development strategies. We'll look at our own strategy. Your neighbors have economic development strategies. If you don't know that or not, they do. The region has one. So we'll take a look at those and kind of see how this shapes and molds into a series of recommendations for the township relative to economic development and ways ahead. Now, other things might include targeted industry types. Like I said, how much, retail, we'll model some of that, see what makes sense. We'll present those recommendations to the board in a public setting like this, get some feedback and see how that resonates with you. Obviously, again, I want to emphasize this a whole lot. We're going to walk hand in hand with Holly and her team and not reinvent a wheel, but just try to come along behind and set an economic development strategy that the community and the board would buy into, and then we'll write that into your overall plan. So that's a real high overview. Hope that's helpful. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions about such a strategy if you have any.
Any,
Well, could you talk a little bit about the role of Big Walnut Schools in this and any other external entities that you imagine coming alongside you in this process?
Well, sure. We'll leave that up to you all to tell us who you want to include in that, and we'll go out and talk to those folks, or if you have other focus groups that you want to pull together that you haven't pulled together yet, that you might think would have a greater level of input to the economic development focus of this, we'll be happy to facilitate those kind of meetings.
Okay.
But definitely want to include any and all those partners that you deem necessary for economic development.
will the township need to sign an agreement with your office to start this task?
No, I've talked to Tracy Davies about our
Okay.
involvement in this, and the county's supportive of our assistance,
All right.
so I don't see a need for an agreement. The methodology is what that's about, and if you're okay with the methodology, that's just designed to make sure we have expectations of each other in this process.
So what is the next concrete step that we need to take to help you move forward?
Well, first thing we're gonna do is spend more time with Holly and her team and get caught up. Now, I've attended your kickoff session back in January. I attended a meeting last week. So I'm familiar with some of the input so far, but nowhere near the level that we need to be. So we need to get spun up with Holly and her team. I'd like for you all to identify, based on that methodology, where you'd like us to spend our time and with who on any individual interviews or focus groups. So you could be thinking about that. So, we can quickly get up to speed on all this input and start the assessment of what we're hearing. That's the key first step.
Any other questions, Dana? Bob?
You could just give us, Castle, your background in Dublin and
Oh, sure.
the county.
Yeah. Well, nearly 40 years of local government experience, about half of which I did economic development. I spent most of that with City of Dublin and culminated my career there as city manager, just retired a couple of years ago, and have been consulting with local governments around the state on a number of things to include economic development. So I'm not saying Dublin did it right, so don't hold that against me. And I'm not going to do Dublin here. We're going to do what the township wants to do, not what I've done, but certainly I've spent some time on the phone with one of your committee members the other day talking about Bridge Park, wanted to know how that all came together. So I really love, by the way, just let me say this from the heart, I spend a lot of time with other communities, especially these last few years in my consulting, and I'm just can't say enough how impressed, for what it's worth, I am that this community is leaning forward and forward planning. And I know that there may be some who wish nothing would happen, but sometimes take it from a guy who started in a city with 9,000 and ended up with 50,000. We didn't get to control all that all the time, but what we did do is control how it was going to happen. So I certainly applaud you all for doing that and sticking with that process and trying to lean forward on it and make the community who you want it to be. It's your community. So, and I applaud the leadership for leading the way on this. So, for what that's worth.
Dana, I have a quick curiosity, and I'll probably put Pete on the spot on some of this too a little bit, but I think this is a great example of how we're leaning into some partnerships, with the county and otherwise, especially as you mentioned that Economic Development Office has Montrose on retainer. And so vicariously, we're able to take advantage of that relationship. To your knowledge, hypothetically, should the township pursue and adopt home rule, does that impact that relationship with the Office of Economic Development at all?
No, it would impact the relationship with us. I mean, how you want to govern yourselves is up to you all, how you want to do that. So I certainly, again, would encourage you to look at all your options when it comes to that. And I'm a little bit familiar with all of the cooperation and collaboration that's going on in and around Harlem Township. Again, that's great to be reaching out and being proactive with all the different neighbors and other agencies and the like that can have an influence on you, whether you like it or don't like it. So that's good stuff to be happening. So for what that's worth.
Thanks, Dan.
It's kind of a non-answer. I didn't mean to not, I hope I answered.
No, no impact is what I was looking for. I
Trying to
was
think.
hoping that was the answer.
Yes.
I'd like to ask if there are other townships or villages within Delaware County that you've worked with in this capacity.
Yeah, I have. We interact a lot with Berkshire Township and Liberty. Some with Liberty, not as much since I've been in this role, but as I look through the records, there's been a high level of cooperation there. I'm actually going to be stepping into some cooperative work between them and Powell and others in the very near future. Berlin Township, they have a new township administrator, Aubrey Hale, if you've not met her. Aubrey, known her since she started her career, so building a relationship there as well. So no, I think, you know, I tell you, it's coming to the county and assisting. It's been about a year now that I've been working kind of part-time in this role, and I've ramped that up to more like 3/4 time, really a lot more than that. But I've really been really impressed with the amount of collaboration and cooperation among the county agencies and the county agencies with the various jurisdictions. And it's just been a real pleasure to be a part of that, and I really enjoyed it. So for what that's worth, that's kind of an answer too, but we interact with all the townships one way or another.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you again for your time,
Thank
and thanks for the opportunity to work with you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Assuming you'll let us do it, but I don't want to assume.
Pete?
Sorry to disappoint you, but I have no PowerPoint or handouts. Everything's up here, so.
There you
So I don't know how you want to start, John. I mean, do you want to kind of,
I think it would be great to hear your take on our meeting with Columbus when
Yeah.
we met in Delaware County.
Yeah.
And how you might imagine this relationship developing and moving forward based upon how you've seen it happen with other townships,
right?
and even some of the various aspects of what a CETA might contain and what a JED might look like.
Sure.
And then I think Adam would probably like to talk about home rule.
Sure. So, you know, I've been doing this close to 25 years now, and there was a point in time in my career where if you would have told me that the city of Columbus was willing to discuss the issues that they're discussing now, not only with Harlem, but with other townships, I probably would have laughed in your face. But I think that's a great thing. And I think that the folks with the city, the current administration, I think we are starting to see a more cooperative approach, particularly with townships. So we did have the meeting, and the meeting with the city was, I think first and foremost was to talk about the annexation issue of the reservoir area. And I believe Brian was here in front of you guys and reiterated a commitment to enter into some sort of annexation agreement, which would include a non-annexation provision. So I really think after meeting with them and talking with you, John, I really think that's probably the easiest piece to the puzzle from my perspective. And the reason I say that is because we've developed in the last couple years multiple annexation agreements with the city of Columbus for various townships that have included non-annexation provisions. So that piece I think is going to be the easiest part to put pen to paper. But I think as we're going through this process, with Holly's group and with Dana and the county and thinking about a more regional approach, kind of thinking how we as a township could potentially benefit from a partnership with the city. What that looks like, I think that's still to be determined. And I think a lot of that's going to be based upon, what Holly recommends and what Dana and his folks come up with as well. But looking at, I know we talked a little bit about just public infrastructure, water, sewer in particular. Is there any interest there from, the city of Columbus, and how can we benefit from their involvement in that? Joint planning effort, obviously, about right after the pandemic, when we were negotiating several annexation agreements with other townships, Columbus really didn't have any interest in residential. They were looking at more of preserving the commercial growth. That is shit. I mean, you only have to pick up the paper, see it on the news. Their philosophy has shifted significantly. And now, you're hearing the buzzwords, housing, the housing crunch. And it's not just Columbus, it's, all over central Ohio. So there's been a shift from their perspective, to focusing on housing. So, looking at potentially, is there some type of, along the southern border, is there any interest in looking at, kind of a planning area? Um, you know, Coupling all this really under a potential CETA, Cooperative Economic Development Agreement. So within the Cooperative Economic Development Agreement, you could have the annexation provision, which would include a non-annexation clause. You could have a joint planning area. You could talk about how you're going to undertake that planning area potentially, how it's going to be funded. And also you could potentially also have other economic development tools included in that, like a JED would be the one that would come to mind. That allows, I'm sure everybody knows what a JED is, but it allows a township to pair up with a municipality to impose a income tax on the net profits of a business and the employees of the business located solely within that JED territory. You cannot impose a JED on solely residential. You can on a mixed use development, and obviously commercial, industrial, and those. So kind of trying to figure out all those kind of pieces and what's best for the township and how can we use Columbus, not really use them, but partner with them to achieve the objectives that Holly and Dana come up with. So there's still a lot of moving parts, and it's, in my mind right now, it's all still 30,000 foot level stuff, other than the annexation piece, which I think, I think is pretty much dialed in from my perspective. There's still a little bit of conversation, but so that's just kind of where we're at. I am a huge advocate of regional cooperation. I've been doing this a long time, and being able to partner with our neighbors and particularly municipalities, I think is always a good thing. And I always try to encourage that, New Jersey and New Albany and Marysville and Jerome Township, I think have had two really successful partnerships over the years. And if we can do something similar or cooperate with Columbus, and it's going to benefit our residents, I think it's something we should certainly take a look at. So that's just kind of my perspective where we're at. It's still obviously very early in the process. We've had a meeting or so, and it's still kind of high level, other than kind of talking about that specific annexation area.
Yes.
Please kind to just give your credential.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. So my name is Pete Griggs. I'm a partner with the law firm of Brocious Johnson and Griggs. Kind of my wheelhouse is townships. I do a lot of work for townships all over the state. I also serve as in-house counsel to the Howe Township Association. So I've been doing it for about 25 years. So
Once the process of negotiations with the city of Columbus starts, how long would you expect it to take?
that's a great question. I've had them go pretty quick. I've had them last 3 years. It just depends on actually what we're doing. I would probably say somewhere in the middle. I mean, probably a year or so, maybe. Maybe even less than that. Like I said, it just depends on how much we're doing. I think the annexation agreement can be that portion of it. I think if that's all we're doing, that I think can move pretty quickly. But if we're looking at a bigger partnership, that is probably going to take a little bit longer, because you got people like me, and there's equivalent on attorneys on the other side for the city, and we like to argue over words. So that takes a little bit of time, and obviously, we're still trying to figure out what our goals and objectives are here at Harlem. So that's going to take a little bit of time as well.
Based on the fact that the annexation part is probably reasonably straight and clean, and potentially the easement for sewer and water, probably housing and things of that nature would be more involved, and based on plan.
Sure.
Would there be any reason not to start sooner than later
Well, I think
on those parts?
Yeah, no, and I think those conversations are already happening. I guess, hopefully Brian's not watching the meeting online, but it's a matter of leverage, I guess, if you will. If, do you leverage the annexation component of it to try to get other things that you want? So, if you just do solely that, do you lose a little bit of leverage? So, but again, until we know exactly what it is we want,
I think the ball is in our court, Bob.
Yeah.
Where until we've finished the strategic planning process, and particularly economic development plan, they've asked us, you need to tell us what you want, which is wonderful, that they're open to that. And so I think until we're able to really define what that is, we're kind of in a holding pattern, although we can talk about things informally, which is fine. But I imagine toward the end of the summer, as this plan ends, that we would be reaching back out to Columbus to continue more formally the discussion. That's my guess.
I mean, my preference would be to have more of a, if it takes the form of a CETA, I'd rather see it all come together at once. That's my preference. So
one of the notes in Holly's presentation was that the township needs a strong economic partner. And working in this relationship with Columbus, I think helps meet that requirement that I was often told, we were often told, as a township, you are powerless. And what we discovered over time is that's not true. The township is only as powerless as its strongest partnerships. And in fact, we can be quite substantial and resilient with good partnerships.
Yeah.
And we are not powerless. And that's very important for us to grasp. And that it doesn't need to be just Columbus. We could, I think, Pete, come to New Albany.
Sure.
And say, hey, we know that development's going to occur in our southeast corner. Let's have a conversation.
You could have a three-way, you could have a three-party CETA. I mean,
Yeah, so-
yeah, you could definitely do that. And, I think, Dana gave you guys kudos, earlier and, I just want to reiterate that because what I've often learned that most townships are reactionary. They wait until the problem is at their doorstep before they do anything. And oftentimes it's too late. So I think by that having that forward thinking, you're well ahead of the curve, from my experience. So again, kudos to you guys for that forward thinking. So, but I agree. I mean, as long as you're ahead of the game and you're thinking about all these issues and how we can cooperate and how we can use the tools that we have to, in our tool belt, I think good things can happen.
Yes.
Any agreement that you're putting together, is the city gonna require a growth corridor? And if they are going to require one, has a location been discussed? And if so, what kind of zoning restrictions can or may be put on that growth corridor area itself?
Yeah, so Columbus has indicated that they would like to have as part of this agreement an option to annex in the future property in the northeast corner. And so that's where County Line and Fancher basically are. It's where Mount Harlem is.
Southeast.
Or southeast corner, sorry. Thank you. The southeast corner. I call it Mount Harlem, big pile of dirt that's out there in the middle of that field that you can imagine at some point is going to be a key place for kind of mixed use development, commercial, et cetera. And that would give them a line into Licking County, which is ultimately what they want. And they anticipate sewer running up to Johnstown. And so what's fascinating there is that land could go ahead and develop. And let's say it's owned by X, and X says they don't want to ever annex into the city of Columbus. Well, then it doesn't get annexed into the city of Columbus because it's the landowner's prerogative. And so while we may write into the agreement, Columbus has this option, they may never be able to exercise that option. Am I saying this right, Pete?
Correct, unless they were to actually acquire the property themselves.
Correct.
I can assure you, a developer, if that is in place, developer will find a number that somebody will sell that and it will go to the city of Columbus.
Possibly, yeah.
Could be the case.
Yeah.
I've been doing real estate for years. I guarantee it.
Which when we consider non-annexation over almost the entirety of the township versus an annexation option over a couple of parcels in the southeast quadrant, that helps us retain our autonomy.
I'm 100% with you.
Yeah.
The question is where is it, and are you going to be able to restrict the uses that are put within that? Because if the city comes up and throws the trash like they did down on Harlem Road, as you go past Walnut, that's not going to be a great corridor to be in.
Right.
Well, and I think that goes back to an overarching CETA, Cooperative Economic Development Agreement, and the township having input in the planning and what that looks like through that corridor.
Is it worth risking? Greatest saying of all time in real estate is time kills all deals.
Yeah.
Is it worth risking the deal dying because some new administrator comes in, some new boss comes in and wants to show how big and tough he is, versus trying to just get the annexation part done and then go on?
No, I look, anything can change at any point in time, I guess, but I think that Columbus recognizes a bigger effort. I know, the conversations they've been having with Delaware County, I think they view Delaware County and I think they view the township as a partner. I really do. So I think we do have a window of time. How big that is, I don't know, but I don't see that changing. in the, next year or so. I really don't.
Yes,
You made a comment in when you were talking about, you thought things were generally progressing very well, except for a few things. Do you have any concern that anything in those few things you're concerned about could be a showstopper?
Did I say a few things?
I don't recall.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think it's just a matter, to me, I think it's a matter of the township figuring out what it is that, as John said, going back to Columbus with our objectives and saying, this is what our objectives are and this is how we want them dealt with. So I think I think things are progressing. I just think it's really a timing perspective right now and figuring out from Dana and his folks and Holly and her folks what it is we want to approach Columbus with.
Joni?
Mentioned CETAs a couple of times with Columbus is there a possibility that besides a non-annexation agreement with them, we could get some kind of economic benefits from this agreement as well?
Yeah, I mean, if there's an area where we could collaborate with Columbus that, if we decide area X is kind of where we see our commercial, retail, mixed use, we could partner with Columbus, and the CETA would contain a JUD component that says that we will use Columbus as our JUD partner and use their income tax in that area. And then you would typically negotiate some type of revenue split.
This overlay for the Cross Fancher Road, that whole southern corridor, was supposed to be a way for us to get some economic.
I think even if that is a Columbus growth corridor, if they want to preserve that, I still think there's a way to revenue share. Potentially.
Without it becoming Columbus.
Oh, yeah.
I think both. I think even if it comes Columbus, I think there's a way to revenue share, and if it stays township, that's where the JED would come in, and it's whatever we negotiate, really, at that point.
And we know that there are going to be expenses that the township has in the near term, let's say in the next 1 to 4 or 5 years, that we incur before we begin to generate revenue.
Correct.
And so could an economic partner help us meet some of those early demands? So with a promise to, as the revenue comes in, be paid back over time. That's where that partnership becomes very crucial. So planning, for example, we know that this is going to require more planning on our part. Planning costs money. The township's pockets are only so deep. And if Columbus is truly concerned about the pressure of housing, and we view our township as developing in a residential kind of way in the main, then doing that planning sooner rather than later is to their benefit. So help us pay for it, for example.
We've done CETAs where the JED recognizes that maybe a certain percentage is given back to the municipal partner because they incurred certain planning costs or consulting costs prior to revenue. And then once they're repaid, that percentage could go back to the township. But yeah, there's plenty of ways that you can help address those issues from a funding perspective.
Anything else?
Where's the closest place right now that Columbus is to Farm Township?
Hoover. Hoover Reservoir.
Yeah, Hoover.
Yeah.
They do intend to annex the Metro Park within the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah. All the way across. Yeah.
Border, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. So that'll bring them basically.
To our corner.
Yep.
Yeah. The agreement to the non-annexation agreement, I believe, will be for 25 years, Pete.
Yeah,
ask?
so I'm working on,
Negotiate.
yeah, I think Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my preference would be 50, but sometimes we do the 25 automatic renewal for another 25. So we'll see. We're working on a couple other ones right now, with a couple other townships, and so they're going before you guys because the only thing they're dealing with is the annexation issue. So we'll see what they get.
Yeah, and I want to comment too, just on this particular topic. You're talking about a Columbus growth corridor. Brian Clark was very, very transparent in communicating like what that could look like.
Yeah.
And specifically on the topic of zoning of that area, right? Now, the landowners would have to agree to the annexation. And then as a part of the CETA conversation, we can dictate what that potential Columbus development would look like.
Correct.
And so, you know, the statement was they cannot, Columbus won't adopt Harlem Township zoning, but they could adopt zoning in that area specifically designed to mirror Harlem Township zoning.
Correct.
Right. So in the spirit of controlling what growth and development looks like, we would have the cards, right? So I just wanted to make sure that clarity was given. Quick talk about home rule real fast, Pete, because
Yes.
you definitely cleared up the waters for me the other day. And I want to say this too, just again in transparency, like two very big initiatives that we're pushing towards the end of the year here. The strategic planning that's been going on for a while, but then also, you know, putting home rule on our plate. Home rule, equally important, but this is also something that would be a ballot measure. So I think that that's important to note to make sure that everybody understands is that this is not something that the board has ultimate power and autonomy to implement or create. We can talk about it. We can, you know, pass a resolution to have the Board of Elections put it on the ballot, but this would be something that the community has to understand and agree upon. And so that's why I think that it's important that we discuss it ad nauseum if necessary to make sure that everyone is clear and educated on the matter, because I think one of the biggest detriments to issues in Harlem Township over the last couple of years has been lack of education on certain issues. So it's very important, I think, to the board, to me, and everyone involved that we all understand what limited holding rule means. That being said, I think we are already planning for the regular meeting in June, which is what date, Ashley? Do you remember off the top of your head? The 16th. Trustee Trainer will not be here, but during that regular meeting, I'm soliciting public comment on this topic. I'm asking Harlem Township to come and ask questions, because if we have any chance of making it happen this year, we would need to have this resolution pretty quick so that we can get that moving. So, you know, we're doing a lot of work on the back end to educate ourselves on it, understand what's necessary. I'm asking the community to do their part and come ask the questions, because it will go to the ballot, as mentioned, right? So that being said, in our meeting last week, I kind of gave a recap of some of the diligence that I've been doing over the past number of weeks, months, really, trying to get some information from all of this. And, you know, the long road led me to Pete, which is where the road probably should have started, Pete, since we do so much anyway. And so rather than, you know, apply any more bias to the conversation than I already have, I guess what I'd love to hear from you just briefly, since we are going to talk about it a lot more next month, is if you could hit on the two main points that are typically costs to the township.
Yeah.
And then if you could kind of give your experience on the topic and your overall personal opinion.
Yeah. So there's a little over 30 limited home rule townships in Ohio. I've been through the process of putting creating home rule about 10 times, 11 times. So, you know, the question that I always get is pretty much twofold. How is it going to help me? And how much is it going to cost me? So I'm just going to start real quick with how's it going to help me? Right. So when a township calls me and they say, hey, Pete, can we do this? The first thing that I have to do, or the county prosecutor has to do, is they have to pick up the high revised code. Typically, you're going to find it in Title V. That's the township section of the law. Then I gotta turn to a page and I gotta find in that statute that says, yeah, guys, you can do this because here's the law that says you can't. Okay, so townships are what we call a statutory creature. I cannot do unless a statute permits me to do it. You think about a city. And full disclosure, I do represent a handful of villages in my weaker moments. I've said, yes, I'll help you. When they call me, the answer is my analysis is turned on its head. It's, is there anything that prohibits me from telling them yes? Right? So I don't have to find a statute that says you can do it. And the reason is villages and cities have what they call home rule power. They have the ability to implement ordinances, resolutions that protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents, unless there's a statute that says they can't do it. So much easier analysis, right? So I have all the power to help my residents if I'm a village or a city. Township is just the opposite. A lot of times I have to tell people, no, you can't do that because I can't find a statute that permits you to do it. So, 80s, the General Assembly came up with what they call a limited home rule form of government for townships. And if you're below 15,000 people in the unincorporated area, has to be put on the ballot and approved by the residents. And so going into the kind of the cost of it, right? So that's the second question. So that's the reason you do it. It really gives the trustees another tool in their tool belt to help residents on what I call certain quality of life issues. That they may not otherwise be able to do because I can't find it in the statute. So you're acting more like a village or a city. You have that ability. And the beauty of it is that I can operate, nothing changes. So I continue to adopt my resolutions like I normally do. If I want to do if I have a junk motor vehicle and the board wants to declare a junk motor vehicle and they want to follow the statutory process, you just follow the statutory process. I don't need to act like a city with 3 readings or anything like that. You only have to follow home rule procedures when you're exercising your home rule authority. So if you're not exercising home rule authority, everything stays the same. You're not going to see any changes in the operation. And most of my clients, it only comes up a handful of times a year, potentially, sometimes not at all, where they have to address something through home rule. So that's the reason why you do it. The two kind of sometimes prohibitive cost factors associated with what is it going to cost me? And there's typically 2. One is that you have to appoint a law director, an attorney, right? Attorneys aren't cheap. So potentially you could experience hiring somebody like me to serve as your law director. What we have recommended, particularly here in Franklin County, they have done it. We had discussed this years ago when Berlin Township had home rule on the ballot, was having the prosecutor serve as your law director at no additional cost. So kind of maintaining that relationship. And at one point in time, at least when Berlin put it on, the prosecutor's office was willing to serve at no additional cost. So it would check that box, if you will. I would suspect that's still the same, but that would need to be something that would need to be discussed with the prosecutor's office. So, but if you can check that box, so in Franklin County, let's see, Blendon, Prairie, and Perry are all limited home rule townships. And then two of those townships, the prosecutor's office serves as their law director at no additional cost. The second potential additional cost factor is the statute requires that you obtain police protection. And that could be one, having your own police department, like, but I'm still trying to figure out why Genoa doesn't do home rule, but that's a whole nother conversation. You can contract for that service with another village or municipality, or you can contract with the sheriff's department. So once again, trying to think outside the box and be creative. When Berlin did it, when Berlin put it on the ballot, we had approached the then sheriff and said, hey, would you be willing to enter into an agreement that basically says you are going to provide police protection, the same level of protection that you currently provide to the township at no additional cost? And really, it's another check the statutory box. And at the time, the sheriff's department was willing to do that for Berlin Township. So from my perspective, it took away the two factors that have the potential to be cost prohibitive in order to adopt home rule. So assuming those factors are neutralized at a no cost agreement with both the prosecutor and the sheriff's office, you know, look, I'm in the business of helping townships, and so often I hear my clients have to say, sorry, we can't help you as residents because we just don't have that power. So I think having limited home rule opens up the ability for the Board of Trustees to help in certain circumstances. The other thing that I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years is the How Township Association is constantly trying to give townships the same authority as cities in certain areas. And economic development is one. And the General Assembly often, to be quite honest with you, is reluctant sometimes. They view us as maybe not being as sophisticated as our partners, our municipal partners and villages. But there always seems to be a willingness to test it out with limited home rule townships. So what I've seen is, whether it's some type of NCA or CRA, they are willing to give that authority to a limited home rule township. And they want to see how it does before they potentially grant it to statutory townships. So I think that's another benefit. Is just having that increased authority, and that's ever evolving. Again, I think if you can check those two cost factors, I really think it's a no-brainer. I think it just sits there, and so when the residents need help, or you need to address a situation, and you can't find it in Title V, your statutory authority, then you run it by the prosecutor and say, hey, but we are home rule. What do you think about that? And it's limited for a reason. Okay, it's not the same authority, so we can't impose our own income tax. So the trustees aren't gonna turn around and put an income tax on the ballot or anything like that. We still have to follow the JED statute in that limited scenario to put an income tax in. We cannot We cannot revise the agricultural laws that apply to townships. So the same zoning restrictions with respect to agriculture still have to exist. We cannot affect the discharge of firing of firearms in the unincorporated area. That's still off limits, even though you may become limited home rule township. We do not have, limited home rule townships do not have subdivision authority. So that still is going to lie with the county. So we can't implement our own. So those are some of the, you kind of see some of the limit. We can't create crime. We can't create criminal offenses as well. So those are some of the limitations that will still exist, but outside of those six or seven things that are listed in the statute, you have home rule authority.
Can you, so one point, in an initial conversation with leadership in Delaware County and putting the 2010 Berlin Agreement across the table and saying, hey, what do you think about this? There was a willing to say, oh, I think this can be done. I don't see why this can't be accomplished.
Yeah.
Certainly they have to do due diligence, and I say this with Dana in the room on their piece and talk to the respective departments.
Yeah.
But I think there, as Dana has emphasized, there's a willingness to work with townships in this endeavor, and I don't anticipate this would be a hurdle for us.
Yeah.
Secondly, can you talk a little bit about the implementation of economic development tools? So for example, homeowners and developers appealing to the board, the trustee board, to create an NCA without going to the county to create an NCA, for example.
So Delaware County is in a unique, the General Assembly did a carve out. And it wasn't really, they didn't have Delaware County in mind, but we've reached it. And so I don't think I'm saying anything I shouldn't, but I know Orange Township is looking at doing an NCA because the county of they're large enough population wise, which I think you guys are. I need to double check that.
We're right there.
Yeah, you're right there. And the population of the county is perfect. We fit the limitation that the General Assembly wrote into it. So you could do an NCA potentially without the county.
Copy.
Yeah.
Can you also,
even if you're not home rule,
okay,
just because we're in that unique situation.
that's helpful.
Yeah.
And then can you comment on the relationship with an engineer?
Yeah. So we have, when you look at Title V, there's really no authority for a statutory township to hire an independent engineer. Maybe it's a road project, maybe it's, I don't know, something else. One of the benefits of being home rule is you have that ability. You don't lose the county engineer. They're still our engineer, but you can hire a engineer. And I've had clients do that because it helps expedite projects, because all they're doing then is turning it over to sometimes the county engineer and they just double check their work. So you would have that ability to hire an engineer to do plans. And all you need then to do is, and Delaware County is not historically like this, but there are other counties where some of them are very close to where we're at, where projects are just sitting for a very, very long time. So having that increased authority, I think, look, developers, time, money, right, helps expedite that process. So that is a definite advantage to being home rule. I think some other creative things, and I'm no way saying this is what you guys would do, but it just kind of like dawned upon me, the village center, if you're looking to develop retail and restaurants and commercial and things like that. I've got a couple clients that are home rule that have developed grant programs for small businesses where they will match it's up to a certain amount. It's however you draft the grant, but maybe it's you have you come up with your own community brand and your color system, and you want to see a sign look a certain way. You can basically go to a business and say, hey, if you're willing to fit within the parameters of this grant, we'll give you $1,000, we'll match up to $1,000 for a new sign or something like that. Facade. I have another client that did a facade improvement program to help try to generate that feel of community within a certain confined area that they, wanted to develop. They kind of wanted to create that identity. So they encouraged it, and you can do those things if you're home rule. You absolutely 100% cannot do those things if you're statutory township. There's no authority to do those things. So those are just some of the economic development things that I've been involved in.
I'm
Yes.
just curious, I was the former mayor of the village of Galena, and we've been talking about home rule for a long time, and whether that was something that's a big deal, like, what you're doing. And by the way, the NCA is a great tool. We use that all the time. So I'm just curious, what is the downside of home rule? I mean, there's a lot of really wonderful things that you.
Yeah,
I'm
so
curious what the downside is.
So I think in the places that I've seen the residents vote it down, I think it's been a bigger distrust of the current administration as opposed to what it actually does. That's been my experience. I just think that it's been
So it's not a function.
a lot of politics.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a kind of change in administrations that's going on. Maybe there's some bigger distrust with the administration, and why would we want to give an administration additional power if we don't trust them? That's what I've seen in the handful of places
So it's
where
nothing functional about the.
I don't think so, no. Because once again, if you can check the box from a cost perspective,
Mhm.
I don't know why you would do. Yes, sir.
What's an NCA?
It's a new community authority.
Thank you.
Basically,
It's
it's
a-
a tax or a levy.
Yeah, it's a governing board. It's an additional
Quasi-judicial.
governing board in the township made up of both township representatives, developers, residents, that then govern how development occurs within the township. And so, for example, the township could require through an NCA that if you're going to develop in the township, you have to join our NCA. And that way we have control, another governing board to control how that development occurs. And it beefs up our architectural standards, our zoning, our overlays, et cetera. There's a fee structure that is required that helps us economically. And it helps us embody our cultural values and our community identity as this development occurs across the township. And so it's a great tool
It is very good.
that I think we would definitely want to employ in the township. And an important point here is that it would be the philosophy of this board that new growth pays for development, not our current residents. And so when we talk about employing economic development tools or levying a JED or a TIF or these tools that take funds, it's on new growth. Mike makes a great point, Mike Pierce, that we can't stop our land value from going up and from your taxes increasing. But we can stop our residents having to pay for this infrastructure, et cetera. It should not be on your shoulders.
So a lot of times, you'll hear the word impact fee. And townships have no authority, whether you're home rule or statutory, to impose a impact fee. I think the NCA is a creative way to help address that issue, having development pay for itself to keep the burden off the back of the existing residents. So.
Linda?
Been talking about this process and the fact that it has to go in front of the residents of the township. What's the process? Do you need signatures in advance? How many signatures to put on the ballot? How does that all work? And what's the time frame, Adam?
So due to the population of Harlem Township, we would not require a petition or signatures from the electors. We would just need to pass it as a board. But that resolution only sends notice to the Board of Electors in Delaware County that we want to put it on the ballot. So it literally is in total control of the electors of Harlem Township of whether or not that takes effect. To that point, I want to take that opportunity to mention, and Pete, correct me if I'm wrong here, but any decision made under home rule authority is subject to readings and referendum by the citizenry, right? So, there was a comment of in the past, it seems like it doesn't go through if there's distrust in the administration or the board, what have you. And I mentioned it last week, but home rule doesn't just give more power to the township. It gives more power to the township because any decision made, like I said, under limited home rule is subject to readings and referendum.
Yeah.
It can't just be passed by resolution.
Yep. So, when you exercise your authority, you're acting just like the village would or a municipality would, where you're required to have 3 weeks. Now you can procedurally, the statute allows you to waive readings and you can declare emergencies and things like that. But if that doesn't happen, if it's not declared an emergency, then every limited home rule resolution is subject to referendum. The other thing the statute provides is that the residents have the right of initiative petition. So you could, if there's something you want to see the trustees do, you could follow that initiative process and put it on and then hand it to them, and then they would have to send it to the board of elections, and that can be put on the ballot. So
You can also by 10% petition. Voted down at any time.
what? Say that again.
If the residents are not happy
Yeah.
with structure,
You're talking about exiting home rule.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can do petition.
There's a wait period. There's a, so if the residents say yes, there is a wait period before you can seek to put it back on the ballot.
Is it 3 years?
Once you
3 years?
2 or 3 years, I
Yeah.
can't remember.
It's 3 after you
Correct.
get rid of it, it's 3 years before you could put it back on the ballot.
Mm.
Yeah. I can't remember. I've never had anybody do it once they've gotten it. So, but
And that's
I
an
do know
important,
there's a
that's an
slight
important
wait
point
Yeah.
that townships. So remember townships, there are 1,200 townships in Ohio. 100 and how many have the population that could 125?
period. Yeah, I think
And
so.
30 some have of that 125 or so
Yeah.
have adopted, and none of them have gone back and said, well, that was a bad idea. That's important.
Yes.
It's the home rule and ORC intersect, or is there not one?
Yeah, so there is a limited home rule kind of statute. It's 504. It's chapter 504. And that kind of talks about how you put it on the ballot, what the limitations are. It also deals a little bit with some specifically list out some additional powers that limited home rule townships have. So with that said, you could still operate as the beauty of it is you could still, if there's a statute that exists for all townships, we can still follow that and pursue that as a statutory town, any statutory township would. It's only when we can't fill that hole or it doesn't benefit us to fill that hole, we act using our limited home rule powers. And then first thing you need to do is check, is it one of those 6 or 7 things I can't do? And then it just falls back on the analysis. Is there anything that in the law that prohibits me from doing it? So that's kind of the intersection.
Bob, to your point, the ORC does outline that at any point after adoption of home rule, it can be terminated by one of two methods. And one of those methods is 10% petition.
Yeah.
Or by the board.
Right, but the board does have to wait 3 years.
Both of those things would have to go again to the ballot. So there would be a timetable there too, right? So, home rule in entering and exiting has citizen oversight.
That's just 10% to put it on the ballot, not 10% to reverse it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
But-
majority, yep. Majority rules.
Yes,
What is the success ratio when these things hit the ballot, pass versus fail?
I think I'm 7 out of 10.
You personally?
Yeah, I don't know about anybody else. Which, that's, you're an all-star if you're playing baseball. That's 70%.
Well, I mean, I think John makes the good point, right? And I think Ohio actually, I think is 1,308 townships total, of which the population to justify limited home rule is much less. And there's, so it's maybe a third of eligible townships are actually doing this. And it's only been since the 80s, which, for, in the sake of government, that's not that long. So, I mean, I think it's an opportunity for the township to, again, be on the leading edge of something rather than being reactive to it. I think it gives us the opportunity to add another tool to our toolbox.
There may have been one, and I mean, they're not our client, that was on last time. I think it may have failed, but I'll be honest with you, I kind of throw the last presidential election out the window in terms of, it just was crazy. So I wouldn't, I don't want to, rely upon anything that happened last presidential cycle. I think moving forward, I think you're probably going to have a better indication of how people really feel about it. I just think there was just such a level of distrust across the country, if you will, of everything that was going on. But yeah, so where I've seen it failed, there has been a lot of turmoil in the administration. That there's no doubt in my mind, that's the reason it failed, because people couldn't see above that. So.
yes.
So you mentioned two potential costs, law director and police protection. Is there anything else that's required?
No, I mean, they just changed all the publication requirements, so you are required to publish a summary of any type of limited home resolution, but we can do that online now instead of going to the newspaper. So
Well, and that's not to say that our current legal counsel via the prosecutor's office and our current police protection via the sheriff's department is free. There are costs associated with that. And so it's not, I think the key phrase there is how much additional cost we might incur, right? And it's words, right? But in Pete's line of work, words matter. And so I always try to be as specific as possible because that additional cost could be minimal.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's a big thing.
Yeah, I think so when we did Violet Township, I think the prosecutor there charged like a very nominal fee. I think it was maybe 15,000 flat fee, 15,000 for the entire year. But the prosecutor's office they come to every meeting. So that was well worth it to the Board of Trustees out there. So.
Dave, if I could just recap real quick before we move on from
go
it, if
ahead.
there's no additional questions. So I guess kind of putting my cards out on the table, but to me, this is a huge opportunity for us. And I know that we're going to continue to discuss it and we want to be as open, public and transparent as possible. But I do want to reiterate, like, as we started this meeting, Holly outlined the 5 strategic initiatives that our community has identified, right? The board maybe put a little bit of spin polish on the words, but all 5 of those strategic initiatives are reflected in limited home rule. All 5. Safety and well-being, community identity and pride, maintaining healthy relationships, intentional growth and development, and our lifestyle and autonomy, whatever trendy words we want to put in front of those. So, you know, to me, it is perfectly in line, not only with the development of Harlem Township, but also the strategic initiatives that we're undertaking right now. It seems to be in step with everything that we're doing. And so, again, I think the most important thing right now is that all Harlem Township, all 5,000 residents understand, like, I would love to get the feedback on this. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think we have the facilities to support 5,000 people on a Wednesday night, but I would like to see that feedback. All three of us have email addresses. Ashley has a phone that works most of the time. And so we'd love to, I want to get that feedback because this would be something that Harlem has to vote on. I wouldn't be so bold as to say that there's no turmoil or trustworthy issues in Harlem Township right now, but I do feel like we are in probably one of the best positions that we have been in a long time for something like this. And so I'm encouraging, I'm pleading with the township, like, come, ask the questions, understand it. You have a board that wants to hear it. You have I dare say, Tom, a nationally recognized fire department. You know, we have folks from external stakeholders that are giving us lots of praise for the work that the board is doing because the citizens have asked for it. You know, Crossroads and the relationships there. I mean, we got a lot of great stuff going on, and I'm continuously impressed by the amount of experience that we have. I mean, Pete and Dana, between the two of you, there's 65 years of experience doing this. Coincidentally, almost as long as Dave's been sitting on this board.
Come on, dude.
You're welcome back.
With respect, Mr. Chairman. So I wanted to just emphasize that because I feel like, you know, this is not going to, you know, make a huge difference in anyone's day-to-day impact, but this could be a big step in the trajectory of our township as the development continues to go on. So that's my piece.
Yeah, and that's good information. The one thing our task will be before that June meeting is to get answers on the cost, if there is a cost.
And I think, Pete, maybe that's something you and I can talk about and we can look at over the next month.
And engage Tracy.
Okay.
And Pete, can you be at the June meeting to help respond to questions?
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
That'd be great.
The good news is that I have every single form and resolution already done.
You already did the work.
Just switch out your name with whoever's that person that did it. So.
Okay.
Also, I was wrong, it's not June 16th, it's June 18th.
June 18th.
Thank you.
You have a meeting.
Right. Okay, John, you want to dive into the trustee part?
Yeah, so there were just a couple of updates that I want to provide. We're trying to keep these meetings to 2 hours to be good stewards of our time and your time. And so on Friday last week, we had a large landowners meeting. And that meant that as we look at how development is going to begin to occur in the township, we recognize that the southwest corner will probably have development first, as that's where the infrastructure is being developed. And so Black & Veatch, the contractor that Delaware County has hired to do the design and build phase of this project, gave a presentation to large landowners about their plan. I've already talked through this slide presentation in a previous meeting and would encourage you to find that to look at all of the details, but just a couple of points. They continue to explore 4 to 5 different options for location of this line. They continue to have both open cut and micro tunneling on the table. The one change that I heard in the meeting was that they are now looking at not just going up to some of the initial properties in Harlem Township, but beyond that, all the way up to Duncan Run. And so to present that as a plan to Delaware County said, hey, we want you to price this out all the way to Duncan Run. That's significant for us because it shows an openness to that conceptually. And then remember, for us, it's beneficial in this initial run to get as far north, northeast as possible to open up more of the township. I wanted to put up tonight the schedule so that you're aware of the timing here. Right now, we believe that the trunk line will be finished in 27-ish, early 27. They did encounter methane in their boring, and that probably has slowed them down. We've heard 6 months potentially. As Black and Veatch looks at this, you can see under the second line going across, the planning and alignment evaluation, that is determining where this line is going to run. They should be done with that by July of August of this summer. Preliminary design by the end of the year. They're doing field and guest investigations simultaneously, and then working on what they call 30% design and easement acquisition. Continuing with the design phase and beginning construction, excuse me, at the very bottom. Mute that. In June of 27 and finishing then in September of 28. There's a potentiality that if easements are acquired, they said it could move to the left as far as 6 months. And so that's kind of best case scenario. When could the sewer be finished? Then you're looking at early 28, best case scenario. Okay, so just having that awareness of what's happening in this regard. Secondly, in regard to large landowner update, strategic planning process, we recognize, thinking aspirationally, that the strategic planning process and identifying these priorities is going to lead to another phase of planning, specifically around the center village concept, because the residents want to see that conceptually. It helps provide identity for us. It helps us encapsulate our values and the architecture that we imagine informing the rest of development across the township. And so I imagine that Holly's team is going to say, hey, you really need to start thinking about what that looks like to help your residents envision the future for Harlem Township. And so imagine a planning phase that is focused on that conceptually. There were developers at the meeting last Friday that are significant in that they have relationships that extend professionally well beyond our township to a level of expertise that is beyond even what we might be able to find in Central Ohio. There may be an interest, and when you're looking at the township and you're looking at what is basically a 7,000 to 8,000 acre opportunity to master plan a community over the next 25 to 50 years, for people at a national level to look at Harlem Township and say, boy, I'd like to be a part of that. I'd like to lend my expertise to that project and speak into the life of this township. That would be remarkable for us as a community if we could gender that kind of interest. And so that remains to be seen. Those folks were sitting in the room last Friday. They didn't run out of the room last Friday. They stuck around and talked, and we'll see what happens. But the important thing there for us timing-wise is that what happens with Center Village conceptually probably would inform the development that occurs in the Southwest, the Northeast, etc. You know, it's kind of an appeal to these large landowners to work with us, to work together, that we be collaborative in development so that the township doesn't develop as a patchwork quilt with all of these independent ideas and concepts, but there be some overarching theme that runs across us. We're not saying we want to look like Georgian architecture in New Albany. We don't. We want to be as well planned as New Albany is, But remember, our values are country. It's a rural aesthetic. It's incentivizing boutique farms. It's saying to equestrian farms, we want you to stay in the township. It's saying to a polo field, we want you to stay in the township. It's saying to people who have this independent streak that says we don't want to be Westerville, we want to be who we are, and we want to live on, what is the word, homestead, in a homestead lifestyle. We want Harlem Township to be that kind of a community where it's everything from, yep, we've got these estate homes that are already here, probably get more built. We want to provide housing so first-time homeowners can come into our community and live, begin to raise a family, and die and never leave the township. That would be beautiful, intergenerational community over time. And so defining that and having subject matter experts speak into a community designed according to our values as expressed by the residents, so that we're a unique country community, country suburban community with a rural aesthetic that is defined by excellence in every respect. What an opportunity there is before us in this regard. And so that's kind of, I think, where we are at this moment, and in working with the large landowners that are going to have a big say in this. There are a lot of us that I live on 3 acres. Frankly, I'm not going to have a big say in this. I don't have as big a stake in this as folks that own hundreds of acres in Harlem Township, and it rightfully so. And so this is very important to develop these relationships and walk down a path together. And that's what we began to do on Friday. It is something that other townships have not done. We are doing something that's unusual. We're communicating at a high level very early on. We're engaged with the county very early on. It's unique. I think sometimes it's uncomfortable for people, but in the long haul, these relationships are building trust and will help us when we have to butt heads, to do it in a way that we can resolve conflict and maintain healthy relationships. It's not going to be easy. There's hard plowing right ahead of us, but I think that we're beginning to lay a really good foundation here to move forward. Now I'll be quiet with that. Bob?
Has the board also been working closely with Delco Water during this?
Funny you should say that. So today I met with the operations director of Delco Water. We met for about an hour and a half and talked at length about the 15 countywide sewer or water plan that they just put out last fall, and the impact for Harlem Township. So we've got a 250,000 gallon tower. They're building a 750,000 gallon tower. We have 1 million gallon capacity per day in one place that will, for the foreseeable future, meet many of our needs. And an average household, they said, uses about 215 gallons per day. And so they are at the same time looking to develop an infrastructure that supports the coming growth and development in Harlem Township. And they're also looking to collaborate with Columbus, because Columbus could help meet some of the needs in the southern tier of the township. And they have a good working relationship with Columbus. At the same time, we've heard a developer talk about a reservoir, and we kind of roll our eyes sometimes at that. Delco is actually very interested in that concept. Water storage in Delaware County is a great need. And particularly as these data centers are built and they require so much capacity for cooling, it's just more water. And so we had a conversation where they expressed an interest in what that might look like in Harlem Township. And there are other areas that they're in discussions with Delaware County for that same thing conceptually. And this is where, can Harlem Township help meet regional demands? That we are looking at water and power and thinking, how can we help the greater region from within the township solve some of these problems? And be a good partner in that regard. So the answer to your question is yes, absolutely. And we'll keep marching down that path. In fact, I asked him, and this is Brian, what's his last name, Bob? I can't remember. I asked him to come to meet with the trustees later in the summer. So he will come to a trustee meeting, I would guess in the September-ish timeframe, and talk to us about the strategic picture with water so that we're all informed. Okay?
Okay.
Mike.
So to go back to what you were talking about, kind of, I love Harlem Township. I don't want to ever leave Harlem Township. My family has lived and died in Harlem Township, and I want to be that person too. You were saying about you want farms and stay in the farm community in the township. You said equine and polo, but that's not my farming expertise.
Yes.
I did not hear you say anything about rainfall.
I think that it will be challenging for grain farmers to stay in the township long term. As I've said to you, Mike, 5 to 10 years. Yep, I think there's a window there. Do I think that in 2050 we're going to encounter combines and tractors on the roads in Harlem Township? No, I don't think so.
So what you're saying, you don't want us in your township?
No, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that as development occurs, I think it will become unrealistic for large-scale farming to continue to occur in Harlem Township.
But we're allowing the development to happen in Harlem Township. So.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. There are decisions that are made at a strategic level that impact us. And so a decision was made in the 90s about sewer provision and a trade-off between Polaris and Harlem. And that agreement was made between Delaware County and the city of Columbus. And now 30 years later, that strategic decision has an impact on our decision matrix. Intel, who none of us could foresee, but a decision was made at a strategic level, maybe at a federal level, to bring that capability into our state. That has an impact on our decision matrix as a township and on how development's going to occur in our township. And I think that what you're seeing is leadership trying to respond the best way that we can to a number of decisions that are beyond our control, where we want development to occur with us, not to us, but then have as much influence and management of this problem set that we possibly can have. Unfortunately, there are going to be bad outcomes as a result of some of this. There are going to be unforeseeable outcomes. And I think that just as suburbs that were formerly farm fields become suburbs and exurbs become exurbs, this process unfolds.
You can't have it both ways. You can't have a suburb and a farming community all the same.
I agree. But what you can.
Point where we're going to be suburban township.
or an agricultural.
Yes.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, I concur. And I think it's the latter, Mike. I think that over time, Harlem Township over the next decade or two is making that transition. And that we really aren't an agricultural township now because our residents don't make a living in agriculture. And that's going to become a more apparent reality over time. However, we do want to encourage our residents to have, we call them boutique farms. I don't know if I like the word boutique, but this farms that are smaller in scale that we would love to see remain in the township and be incentivized in the township. If that's helpful. And I'm talking too much here. I'll let these guys talk too, but.
Yeah. Well, what Mike's saying, I'm kind of in the same boat he is.
Yeah.
Grain farming, and you can see the writing on the wall. The traffic is unbearable now. I can't imagine what it'll be another 5, 10 years. 10 years puts us out of business. Not safe to run on the road. Blenda happened to be in Sunbury and came home 4:15 May 20th, the after evening. Her turning onto 605, right turn to come south, there was 57 cars stacked up to head north because somebody was trying to turn left to go to Sunbury. Now, I went to a meeting ODOT had, and there's going to be another one in June. I'm going to go to there'll be 2 years after the first one. At that time on their agenda, the intersection of 605 and 37 was not on their 10-year plan. What? That's crazy. And I intend to tell them that in June. Because we've turned in, made left, be headed south, try to turn in the farm, turn left. We've had people pass us on the left and the right at the same time. They're in the ditch and across the center line. And that gets your attention. So that's all I got to say on it. Are there any other public comments this evening? Yes, sir.
Going back to your schedule here, and I know this is going to sound counterintuitive, but is there anything that you can do to slow the growth or the input of the sewer lines in Harlem Township?
My first response to that is, why would we want to slow it?
Why?
Yes,
What is needed for development? Sewer.
sewer,
As soon as sewer comes, development comes.
right,
And the slower sewer comes, the slower development comes.
right.
Or the quicker the periphery annexes to the neighboring municipality.
Good point.
That's
Right.
the other
You
problem.
just said that we're gonna have an agreement with Columbus,
To prevent.
to prevent. And work on possibly doing something with New Albany, although you've said New Albany has indicated they're not interested in annexing.
Right.
So having said that, who's gonna annex?
That would be a question for the landowners around the perimeter of the township.
Has to
Yeah.
be somebody that's adjacent, and that would be New Albany, and I'm talking southern, I mean,
Yeah.
I live southern, so I don't know.
Sure.
the Situation, but they're talking, those are your two. Westerville can't get over here. Nobody else can get over here, it's Columbus and it's New Albany.
Right.
So the slower you can make it go, the better it is. I have one other question that's related to this, which is, if in fact you reach those agreements, can we take away holding my tongue here, the commercial zonings that you have up and down Green Cook Road? Because if nobody can annex, then you'll be in control of that, and you can allow residential and not ruin everybody's property values up and down Green Cook Road.
So a couple initial thoughts. So I'm going to speak for me personally. I think that working collaboratively with developers is a good thing. And I would not want to be in an adversarial relationship with large landowners in our township who are looking at their economic future and are working with developers, whether they're selling their property or anticipating selling their property for development, that we also have a responsibility to these large landowners that want to work with developers to help them in that process. And so I would not personally see the need for trying to stop that from happening when their economic future is at stake. And time is money. Secondly, the work that's been done on overlays with Green Cook, I wasn't here, but perhaps Holly, if you wanted to speak to the mindset there and why that looks as it does.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. You do have, potentially Johnstown to the east. You have Sunbury to the north. So we were just looking at every potential concern. Not that any of them were immediately abutting the township at this time, but could potentially at some point come over towards this way. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that they are overlays. They're a tool in the tool bucket. And the underlying zoning continues to apply if they're not utilized. So.
Is that helpful?
It's an automatic switch. Somebody comes in and says,
Yes.
it's over 25 acres and says, I'm gonna build whatever commercial crap I wanna build here.
Right.
And I'm speaking, I do commercial real estate for a living, so
Yes.
don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? So, but it doesn't have a place in Harlem Township. That's just my opinion. Everybody has an opinion.
Right. Harlem Township, there will be a requirement for the appropriate commercial and industrial base to support what we want in the rest of the township. And so it's trying to find that balance. What is that? I think that's part of the work that Dana is going to be doing. And then thinking about where is that? And those are both questions that I think we're going to continue to explore, and our residents are going to have continued input into this process.
I can tell you, I do appreciate you guys have become much better at communication. Because when those overlays were going through and that got passed one night, I was gonna try to referendum. I talked to a bunch of my neighbors. They had absolutely no clue what had happened. But they also didn't care enough to referendum, and they're on the other side of the street. I'm not gonna go out and get that because they've changed how many signatures you have to have. So I'm not gonna go try to do that myself. And so I said, hey, you guys are gonna get what you deserve. So, yeah, but it is automatic. So 25 acres or more,
Right.
somebody wants to put in commercial, commercials go on there.
Understood.
Ryan Gallagher.
Yes,
Two quick questions.
sure.
You started saying, look at a past meeting for this presentation on the sort, like what month would I look at? What?
That was in it was last month. It was in April, I think around the 30th or so during our development meeting.
30th.
April 30th. Yep. And I went through the entire slide deck from Black and Veatch. And
I'll go with.
okay.
And secondly, when the comment was made about you said you don't expect large farms in Harlem Township in another 20 years.
Yes.
And you're not saying that, I took that to mean, you're not saying we're gonna do something to kick them out.
No.
You're saying that their land is gonna be of such a value that they're gonna make the decision, I can sell this.
Right.
And go buy twice as much land somewhere else and continue farming if that's what I want to do.
That's correct.
I think were it up to the board, Harlem Township might develop with a quaint village center and then continue to grow and develop as has been with lots of farm field, lots of rolling open space. However, Harlem Township is a 20-minute drive from the 14th largest metropolitan area in the United States, right? So the whole, I think I made a joke about a year ago of we're gonna build a wall around the south end of the township and make New Albany pay for it. It's just not realistic. You know, we'll either get sued or we'll get annexed to pieces and then we'll look like some of these other townships. So, you know, what we've been trying to do for the past, I guess, 2 years now, right, Dave, John? I mean,
Yep.
almost solid 2 years is control what that looks like.
Yeah.
I live in the southeast corner.
Sure.
I live almost at Harlem and Fancher.
Mhm.
And I know what's going in across the street.
Yeah.
And my best hope is I'm gonna get a nice restaurant there somewhere that I can walk to. Because I can't change. I don't think there's anything I can do, any yelling I can do, any movement I can do to stop this. Because those landowners have rights and they want to exercise those rights. And I understand that. And I'm gonna sit on my little 1.3 acres. And I've already bought my plot in Harlem Cemetery. And so I'm planning to die here. My wife is planning to die here.
Let me know when you need it. Gotcha.
Take your time, though. Take your time.
So, you know, I'm gonna be here for a while.
I'm gonna pay for the restaurant for you.
Be here one way or another.
Yeah, and I mean, my kids are now just turned 40. We moved in when they were a year old.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I haven't been here generationally, but yeah, I understand, and I understand that, and I heard the comments of, no, we're just gonna say, no, they can't do this. And I wish more people would have come to the previous planning committee that was going on, so they could understand, you know, why these decisions are made, and, you know, stomping your feet and saying, no, we're not gonna do this, is not a solution. And what resulted in things you had no idea
Right.
that they could build a 50 building unit on an acre and a half.
What's your name, sir?
Dutch Holland.
Dutch? Looking forward to seeing you at every meeting moving forward. We'll even bookmark you some time to speak. But I
Yeah. I was gonna say he's on the steering committee. I saw him on the video.
Dutch, I really do appreciate your feedback. I mean, I think that is an optimistic point of view and a necessary one. So thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, Molly?
I apologize if this has already been addressed. Molly Snodgrass speaking, because I did come in a little bit late. And John, I see the little smirk on your face. I bet you know what I might be about to ask. But has anything been brought up today during the meeting of how all of this interacts with the Big Walnut School District and how we see that relationship developing? Being someone that is running for school board this year, I see it as very important that the school district is part of this, you know, future vision of Harlem Township. I think there might be a little bit of work to be done because I think some of the consensus is that, you know, Big Walnut wants to stay a one high school district because you start losing a sense of community when this high schools fragment. Personally, I don't see that being realistic for the long-term future of Big Walnut School District. So I'm just curious, like, how you are working to build those relationships and how important you see that being as this all progresses. And
Yes, and Adam met early on with the
Superintendent, my CFO.
And I have met with the superintendent and the CFO, and we feel we've been told repeatedly by developers that that is the most important relationship that we can have in this process, beyond anything else. And we emphasized tonight when Dana was here, the need to include the Board of Education, superintendent, treasurer in this economic development planning process, and he promised to do so. And so I think that when your presence here is very important and your continual prodding is very important to keep us apace to this need. And I hope you win and get on the Board of Education because we need that representation. you should know that we did talk to them about, hey, if you were to build in Harlem Township, they think, well, elementary school, middle school, we would need a developer to give a minimum of 20 acres to make that happen. And some thought has already being given to, okay, where do we think that would happen in Harlem Township? Where should we put those schools? That we need to be master planning that and making it a part of this community.
I mean, I would go one step further and even ask like high school, how much land is needed for a high school? And
Yeah.
where might that go?
So their pushback was, hey, we've got room for 500 more kids in our high school. And I guess they're in a strategic planning process this year.
It's true, they are. I'm
Yes.
interested to see where that goes.
Yep.
But I also think that we in Harlem Township, I mean, you mentioned in one of the last previous meetings that we could have 7,000-8,000 more
That's correct.
houses in the district.
Yeah.
That's gonna be many more than 500 new students.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know that one high school will accommodate I mean, in the short term, yes, fine.
Right.
But, in the long term, I do think that we need to be planning for how much land does a high school need and where might it go? Just have to
Right.
go back to our
Give you an
mind.
idea, the new high school and the other building sits on about 90 acres of vacant land. I used to farm that a few years ago. So, and you see, they don't have enough room to park cars for a football game. Figure that out.
But yeah, I think that's a big reason why it's important to have the school district in all these conversations, because they need to know that like, oh, wait, our capacity at our high school is not gonna be sufficient X number of years down the road.
Yes.
They need to be tuned into that.
Agreed.
Anything else? Do I have a motion?
There's no further business. Motion to adjourn at 9:17.
Second.
Second, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. We thank you for.
Thanks,
attending
everyone.
And your input you made this evening.
John, Ryan Gallagher.
Gallagher. Yes, thank you.
And